Good evening. I'd like to call work session for the Belton City Council meeting, April 27, 2021, in order. What items do we have tonight?
Thank you, Mayor. And the first item that we have under the work session is to try to provide a little bit of education to all the council and those just are in the know. We hear so many acronyms in government, sometimes it's overwhelming. So put together just a brief packet for you. I set one at each of your desk stations and wanted to talk about Mid-America Regional Council, which is an acronym that everyone refers to as Marc. And I'm going to go ahead and go to the second sheet first and talk about what is Marc. Well, Marc is you'll hear people refer to it as an MPO. It's a Metropolitan Planning Organization that was created by federal law to provide elected officials with input into planning and implementation of utilizing federal transportation funds. And this has ended up becoming a kind of a collection area so that local agencies and governments that want to be able to apply for grants and for funding, a lot of that funding is sent through Marc, and then those member areas are outlined in this map here. So it's eight or nine counties. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 county area with over 119 cities that are and counties that are involved. And so you have all of those people that are vying for dollars for our region, and they end up becoming a clearinghouse, so to speak, and a process that we follow. So, for example, when we want to apply for something for the North Scott Corridor and the funding that we just received for that, there was a multiple-step process that we went through in order to be able to obtain those dollars that ended up going through 3 different committees, and ultimately then finally the Mid-America Regional Council Board for final approval. So there's a real process that gets followed for that, but there's millions of dollars that are involved and multiple people that are vying for those dollars. So you have all this information. I'm not going to read it to you. It is available there. Not only are they an MPO, they're also the council referred to as a council of governments, which is basically the same thing. It defines what those boundaries are, those dollars and those areas, but basically the planning and the process to be able to get there. So it's not just for surface transportation. There are other areas that are involved. And we'll talk about those in just a minute. So there is the Marc Board of Directors. The board officers, there are 5 of those, and it shows there who those individuals are. But I thought you also might be interested to know who from Cass County is represented on the board. Bob Houston, our presiding commissioner from Cass County, as well as the mayor from Raymore, Christopher Turnbow. This is just a sampling of Belton's involvement in the Marc committees. There are many and they are plentiful, but every individual that's sitting around here is committed in some way or attended a planning committee, a session, a project that is represented here. And there's even more, but to have listed all of them would have just been well into the minutiae and somewhat overwhelming. So I just wanted to let you know that there are multiple committees there that we do participate in. And then what starts next is just the hoarding list of acronyms that are involved. This list actually started off by Mid-America Regional Council. They put it together, and then what I tried to do was go through and highlight some of the ones there in bold that you'll see more, that you hear about more. So to be able to and some that we added. For example, the third column there at the top is BEMA. We added that because you'll hear about that. That's the Belton Emergency Management Agency. And so you'll hear a lot about all of these. And they're all contained within the packet of information that you have there in front of you. Multiple pages. They're all in alphabetical order. It's overwhelming the number of acronyms that are there. But I hope by being able to provide this to you this evening, it's a little bit of a cheat sheet. So that when somebody says, we're interested in participating in the PACE program, you understand that that's a property assessed clean energy program that we are level 2 that the city does participate in, and that goes through our planning and building department. So if somebody wants to be involved in that program, we try to assist them through that committee. So it goes all the way through, and there's about 6 or 7 pages there. Marc actually puts it into a 3-page document, but the print was so small you can't read it. So we tried to enlarge that a little bit to make it a little friendlier for everybody. And with that, that's all I have. Mr. Mayor, about Marc and the acronyms and who they are as an organization. Are there any questions that I can answer?
Does anybody have any questions? Councilman Powell.
This is great. I don't have any questions about that, but just for my own information, a dumb question. What's the difference between a work session and a regular session here in Belton?
You want to answer it? I saw you leaning.
So essentially, the work session is a creation of city managers throughout pretty much the country as just a time where the city council typically does not consider any legislation, but instead is just given information that can be used in later deliberations and consideration of other legislative actions.
Anybody else have any questions on the Marc pamphlet? All right, letter B, monthly financial report.
The monthly financial report comes to you this evening via Sheila Ernzon, our Assistant City Manager and Finance Director, and she'll be providing that information. Sheila?
Would it be okay if I took off my mask? Okay. I think people can hear me better and maybe also read lips that way. So today, all of you should have received at your city email the monthly financial report. Typically, you will receive it earlier than the day of the meeting, but we've just been trying to close the year. We're working on 2 different audits now, and we're tardy, but I wanted to go ahead and print it all out, and I put it on. You have 2 reports. You have, and I just kind of want to talk about them and what you're going to find in them. And you haven't probably had a lot of time to look over them. So if you have questions tonight, I'm happy to answer them. But also, if you have questions after tonight, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask, okay? So the first report that has kind of a dashboard that's says positive and negatives. This is kind of a short report for the council. It was actually requested by some council members several years ago because they just wanted a condensed version of the things that they felt were important. And so we kind of pull this information out of the big report. And so you'll find a lot of the same information in both reports, but I'm going to go over the short report first, and it's always labeled council report. And the first page, we usually are looking at revenues. So our expenditures are set, and so are our revenues, but there have been years and times when our revenues look like they're trending lower than what we had budgeted. And it's okay if our expenses are trending lower, but if our revenues are trending lower, then that's obviously dangerous because we're probably not going to have the cash, and we might have to look in and look at not spending all the expenditures that council had approved, because we know that there might be a cash flow issue and there wouldn't be cash. And so general fund is the most important fund in city government. And the reason that I say that is because general fund is the only money in the city that is not restricted to be used for a specific purpose. All of the other funds in the city are restricted and can only be used for a specific purpose that's laid out in law. So we could never use park funds to pay for police. We could never use water funds to pay for sewer projects. We can't use sewer funds to pay for water projects. All of that money is restricted and can only be spent on certain things. But the beauty of the general fund is that general fund dollars, if the park department is running low, the city council could appropriate general fund dollars towards the park. If the water fund was running low, the city council could appropriate general fund dollars to that purpose. All of the departments that don't have their own revenue source are located in the general fund. If if a service that we provide, the city provides, has its own revenue source, then it is in its own fund. So you'll see we don't charge people when they call 911 or when they ask for a police officer to come. So our public safety services are being funded through general fund revenues because we're not charging when somebody calls, if that makes sense. And so,
I guess my question, we do charge for ambulance, we do charge for speeders.
we do.
So, I guess, so that's like a quasi fund. I mean, that money goes back into the courts.
It goes into, the court is located in the general fund, so court fines and costs are general fund revenue. And you can see,
I mean, I know they don't generate enough funds
They
to
do
fund
not.
their whole apartment, but I'm
Correct.
assuming there's some of the departments being funded by the activity of the police with speeders or any other type of traffic tickets, and then ambulance calls.
honestly, you're correct. And when I look at it, I actually like to look that court fines and costs are funding the court itself
Okay.
instead of public safety. But those court fines and costs and the ambulance revenues, they all go into the general fund and they become general fund revenues.
Okay.
Yes. And the court fines and costs are not restricted. The ambulance revenues, those can really only go to fund the fire department. But that's the fire department costs are so vast and that it's just a drop in the bucket, if that makes sense. And so, we're
It's just when you
housing
were
them
talking
there.
about, like, these departments don't generate any income, but they do, but it's not enough to support the water or
Yes.
sewer fund, it's not enough to support the whole project, but they are bringing in some type of revenue.
Yes. And a lot of our planning department, our inspections, animal control, all of those, there are fees that are associated with
That's true.
many departments, just not enough
I
to
guess planning does have
completely-
like the licensing fees or the permit fees and all that stuff,
Yes.
so,
Yes.
okay.
And there are fees in the general fund. You're correct. Yes. Great question.
There's a line item in our budget that talks about. In our budget, there's a line item that talks about roughly what permit fees are for the year expected or in the past and all that, so new
Abs-
council can go in and look at that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, so basically this first page, it's just a dashboard. It's looking to see if we have any concerns where any of our revenues might be trending over or under, and if there's a concern, you can see this is the end of last fiscal year. And so we actually ended the year ahead on property taxes, sales taxes, licenses and permits, grant revenue, and fees. And then our court costs and fines were down from what we had budgeted, and utility franchise taxes were also down. And so if you go to the next page, that's just a title page, basically. If you go to page 4 of that report, this report shows you the cash balances of all of the different funds in the city, and we have the balance as of March 31st, 2020. The change over, in this case, it's the entire fiscal year, and then the ending cash balance as of March 31st, 2020. And so if I glanced down this page and saw any negatives, I would be very concerned. But we don't have any, and that's a good thing. Are there any questions about the cash balances page? Okay, the next page, page 5, this is the report of fund balances. And there are also no negative numbers as of March 31st, 2021, and that's also good. And the most important thing that probably all of you are going to be interested on this page is we always have the calculation of what the general fund balance is. The council passed an ordinance and they have set that the minimum general fund balance can be 15%. It's very important not to go below that 15%, because the 15% actually gives us the cash flow to be where we're not having to take out a loan while we're waiting on that property tax revenue that typically comes in December and January. So everybody knows that property taxes are due at the end of the year. And we have dropped below that 15% fund balance before, and the cash flow challenge gets a little bit tricky to make the payroll. The other reason that the 15%, why you might want to go above the 15% fund balance, is that reserve is used in the case of any emergencies that might happen. So if there were a tornado or some other kind of natural disaster, we could use that money. Remember, general fund revenues aren't restricted, so we can use that money to continue paying expenses out of, you could imagine that if a tornado hit our water tower or something like that, and we needed cash and cash flow and to be able to make payroll while we were not getting in revenues because something happened with the cash flows from utility bills, or maybe we couldn't send out bills for some reason. Maybe a lot of people in the community weren't able to pay their bills. Like, the general fund is the only fund that can help pay those expenses in the event of a natural disaster, if that makes sense. And so it's important to have a reserve while we would be able to apply for SEMA or FEMA grants. It will take several months for us to be able to get to that point. And so the general fund really is not only going to pay general fund expenses for our public safety in an emergency, but also all of the other funds, if that makes sense. And so there's been a lot of debates of whether or not 15% is enough. That is for the council to decide. A lot of communities feel more comfortable with a higher fund balance than a lower one, just knowing that it's the general fund that has the money to fund those emergencies.
I'm going to ask some questions and just rephrase things in a way that makes sense to me.
Okay.
When you say other communities prefer a higher balance, do you have a number that you're aware of other communities holding on to?
We did a survey a few years ago, and anywhere from 25 to up to 50 or 60%. I mean, it's
Right, 50 is on the high side. Reached out and here just recently in the last month asked a few, and actually that was generated by a question that Councilman Savage had, wanting to know how long 15% would last to make payroll. And what I found out from the communities, to answer your first question, is they're mostly around 30 to 35%. That's typically where I see everybody's reserves at. I've not seen anyone as low as ours, but there's only a couple that are at 50 or above.
Okay. I'm going to ask a question that may be very dumb, but I just want to know. If these funds are setting aside, in my mind, and I've done Financial Peace University, and I realize personal finance is very different than government finance, but 15% sounds like a sinking fund for the end of the year to pay payroll, right? So we don't have to take any money out, essentially. Christmas sinking fund. The money that we're holding on to, do we earn any investment income back on it? Is there any method to do that?
yes.
Okay. Okay. So if we had a means and there was a way to have a higher percent, there would be a benefit to that.
Yes, although, and just so you all know, interest rates are very low right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I just wanted to frame that out in my mind.
respect to the same thing. We have fallen into tough situations before. We have pulled that down by plan as low as in the 12s. I don't know exactly what the number is. Immaterial to that, so sometimes we have to do these things with unexpected economy, I think, was the big thing that pulled that one away. By the same token, too, 15% I still believe is a fair number because it allows us anything above that. We need to keep that money working for the city as best as we can with the knowledge we have and the needs that we have. So I want to be a little reluctant myself about having too big of a reserve. I think we need to keep that money's working. So just a thought. Thank you.
Yes, and exactly what's the numerator and denominator of this 15%?
Oh, that's good, because I was going to talk about this. So this 36.54% is actually calculated using the budgeted revenues number. Typically, I don't want to change the formula. I want to keep that constant no matter what month it is. But what we would typically do at the end of the year is we would actually use the actual revenue, because the ordinance is set up that the fund balance, the reserve, is 15% of our revenues. And so if I calculated it using the actual revenues that we ended up with this year, our fund balance is actually 32.4% instead of the 36.54. So if you look at Councilman Powell, if you will look at page 7, and you can see the total general fund revenues of $19,669,702. We pull out those transfers in from other funds. So basically the calculation for the denominator is 19,669,702 minus the 3207,625. And then the numerator is the 6,014,987, that general fund balance. And I want to point out that the reports that you get every month are on the cash basis of accounting. When we get our consolidated annual financial report, they don't want us to use the acronym anymore, so I'm saying consolidated annual financial report. First of all, our fund balance will change when it changes to audited, because that will be swapped with the accrued fund balance based on accruals instead of the cash basis. But our budget is done on a cash basis of accounting, and so that's the easiest way to compare for the council each month what we have coming in and going out, if that makes sense. So that's probably a lot of information. Yes.
So you're saying that we finished about 6% up from what was projected?
I looked right before this meeting started, and my budget estimate in the budget was 26.76%.
Right.
And yeah, we ended at 32.4. Yes.
Gotcha. That's what I wanted to double check. Thank you.
Sheila,
Yes.
also you could have probably two different numbers, couldn't you? The actual and versus the budgeted number. I mean, if you budgeted for a 15%, but then actual at the end of the year was 12, you would have two different numbers, such as you have there, 36 and 32.
Yes. Yes, we're gonna have what we budgeted, and a budget is our plan for the year. We definitely make sure we follow that plan for expenditures. I try to be very realistic with my revenue projections, but I also know that if I have to come to the council and say that we're not meeting those revenues, and we've planned to make all these spending decisions for the year, and I have to come and say, okay, here, we're not making our revenues, now we have to cut expenses, it's going to change all the plans for the different departments, and that's not a good idea. So, a lot of the council will say very often that my revenue projections, that I'm very cautious and conservative, but the reality is that typically my revenue projections are within 2 or 3%. And usually this year I undershot them by like 1.5%. Usually it's the other way. And so even though maybe sales tax revenues, I'm off on that, there's always some other revenue line item that I'm off the other way. And so typically, if you don't get lost in each line item and you look at total revenues in each fund, and I don't know how it happens, but luckily, because I don't have a crystal ball, but luckily my revenue projections are within less than 5% usually off. So maybe not in a single line item, but overall we're really close on target, which is amazing. Okay, the next page, on page 6, this is, I really like this. This page is a great page if you don't want to get too deep into anything. It is a quick revenues and expenditures, and if we're bringing in more money than we're spending on each fund, and you can see every single fund of the city all on one page. And you can see that for fiscal year 2021, we brought in almost $2 million more than we spent. And we had a pretty balanced budget. That is going to be, we had the CARES Act money last year. We were able to get reimbursed for expenses that we already had budgeted for our police and our fire salaries. So we were able to get one-time money in revenues that we had already had money set aside for those expenses, but we still got reimbursed for them. And so that is a big part of that. We have a lot of departments that came in the general fund under budget. The reason for that is we always budget for a full year of salaries and benefits for each approved position. And sometimes we have turnover, and we might have some months that we have a position that's kept vacant. And then also when you have a new person in, there's a couple of months before they're eligible for loggers, before they're eligible for health insurance, dental insurance, if that makes sense. But we always want to make sure that when council is approving a budget, that all of the expenses are being budgeted so that we don't get to the next year and there's not enough money when somebody's in that position for the full year, if that makes sense. You can see that our park fund had more expenses go out than revenues come in. You can see that the Belton Town Center TIF fund had more expenses going out than revenues coming in. That actually piqued my interest because honestly, I was like, how in the world can that happen? We had funds with the trustee, and so they were counted as revenue in a previous year. When we closed out that TIF fund, the trustee, the bonds were paid off, the funds from the trustee got sent back to us, and then we had to liquidate all of that and send it back to the taxing jurisdictions that we had collected it from.
Did we get, I guess the general fund got some money back too?
Yes. Yes. And the park fund, the debt service fund, and all of the sales tax funds.
Sheila,
Yes.
the park fund was 173,000 in the hole at the end of the year, but down here, the park sales tax was 446,000 greater.
Yes.
So they've made money, even though,
Their operating fund, yes, their operating fund didn't make the money, but yes, they have extra revenues in the park sales tax fund. That is exactly correct.
thanks.
And then you can see our capital project funds. Those usually are going to be negative, typically because we'll get a big influx of funds, like maybe from a bond issuance. And then, so you'll see 1 year where all of that money comes in, and then we're spending it over the next few years on the expenditures from the project, if that makes sense. And some of these, I actually have been working on the cash carryover true-up ordinance that you guys will get in a couple, probably 4 weeks. But some of these expenditures, the revenues over and under, for example, the general fund, some of this over is because there were capital projects that were budgeted that the money didn't go out last year, and we will be asking the council to reappropriate those funds for this year. And you can see that, you'll see it in general fund, you'll see it in the street fund, you'll see it in several of the funds where there are just capital outlay items that didn't get completed. We ordered them, but they weren't delivered. Something happened, and we'll be asking to carry that over. Okay, this on page 7, this is just actual revenues. By the way, all of those reports are going to be in this big report, but this next one on page 7, you won't find it in both packets. This one's only in the council one, where council was really concerned 1 year about revenues, and so asked us to kind of break out where we thought we would be year to date on revenues. This is for March 31st, so it's the whole year, so it's kind of redundant in the 12th month of the year. But basically, there are revenues that don't come in pro rata throughout the year. Like property taxes, for example, we get a little bit trickles in, but then December and January, we get a lot in. And so if you look at the property tax revenue in November, you're going to be like, oh my goodness, it looks like we're really behind. But we're not really behind, because we know that we're not going to get very much property tax revenue until December and January. Council might not necessarily know that, and so they asked the finance department to kind of tell them how much were we expecting each month, so that then they could compare and see, should they actually be concerned about revenues being under, or should they not be concerned, if that makes sense. And we do that for both. They were concerned at that time for general fund and the golf course. And just so you guys know, if any of you have different concerns or something doesn't concern you, there's no reason why we can't change these reports to make sure that you guys are getting the information that you are interested in having, and that you need to make the best decisions you can. The next page, these are our investments, Councilwoman Lawson. So you can see it's a list. All of these investments, you can see that our interest, our average return is under 1%. We're not getting a ton of money. Interest rates are pretty low. We ladder them out for investing. first, I have to invest, my first objective is safety. That by law, I can't put anything and invest anything in something lucrative, even if it looks like a great investment. Safety is my number one objective. Then is liquidity. So I can't invest anything, and that is, I'm not going to be able to make liquid if we have something happen, because this $50 million of investments, it's cash that is included on your page 4 of your report. So we keep about $4 million just sitting in the checking account, and we try to invest the rest of it to try to maximize the earnings that we're getting. We don't want that money to sit, but it's laddered out, so you'll see things are constantly coming in and then being reinvested. But safety, number one objective, liquidity, second objective, and yield is the last thing that, it's an objective, but it's not very high up there. Safety and liquidity are the two top priorities for government, investing government funds. And then there are some graphs that, goodness, these date back to when Councilman Lockridge was on the council. He really liked graphs, and we just keep including them each month. So I don't know, that's the short report. I will go quickly over the long report, if that's okay with you guys. This is the report, the long report is the one that I really focus on most of my time, where I'm looking to see if there's anything to be concerned about. So again, page 4 is the report of cash balances. It's the same as the other report. This also has a list of rainy day fund balances for some of the funds. Usually the ones that sometimes, if something pops up in the year and we didn't have something budgeted and a department really needs something, then they might ask the council, can we transfer money out of the rainy day into the expenditure line item to do a budget amendment? The next page is the fund balance report, same as the other, the council report. And then also page 7, this is the same overview of revenues and expenditures as was in the other packet. And then here, starting on page 8, it's the statement of revenues and expenditures. It gives you a little bit more detail for the general fund, the park fund, and the golf fund, because those are the funds that the council seemed to be most interested in. But you can see the revenues in the general fund and the expenditures in the general fund. We have a few of the departments that are over budget in this year, and that is not typical. The reason that happened this year is because of COVID. Except for the fire and the police salaries, the other COVID expenses that we were reimbursed for could not be included in the budget. So we did not do a budget amendment to put those in the budget because we didn't want to disqualify ourselves from being able to get those funds. So, for example, administration, they look like they're over $7,611.66. Well, $20,598 of those expenditures, which is more than the $76.11, were spent for COVID expenses. And then, again, information technology, they're over budget by $7,127, and they had $7,840 of COVID expenses that were not included in their budget. And then the fire department, they are over by $86,853. $65,904 of that is due to the COVID expenses. And then they also had work comp expenses that were over budget by $152,910. So that's not you're typically never going to see any of our departments be over budget, but you see it this year because of COVID. It made a little bit of a unique situation. And other departments did have COVID expenses. It just didn't make them go over budget, if that makes sense. And then starting on page 13, this is just a comparison of this current month to the same month the prior year. And this can show, I look at this to see, gosh, did some revenues that we were expecting not come in? Did somebody not bill for something? It's kind of like an analytical procedure and a tool for me to kind of review, so I can try to make sure that nobody's forgetting to do something, if that makes sense. And then if you look at starting on page 18, this is comparing the year to date to the previous year's year to date. This is probably one of my favorite reports. I don't know, it actually is very helpful and one of my favorite analytical tools. So, and then if you look at page 23, so this didn't used to be here, but here it is now, and this is the comparison of the actual revenues to anticipated revenues for general fund and golf course. That was in the other packet, and then the investment schedule again, but no graphs. Any questions?
Anybody got any more questions? I know that's a lot of information, so.
It is, and like I said, please reach out if you have any questions that come up, over the next few days. It's a lot. I felt really bad not getting you guys the reports until earlier today, so.
Thank you. Do we have any more?
No, Mayor, that concludes the work session.
Anybody else have any questions before we adjourn? Okay. Thank you. With that, we'll adjourn the work session and call the regular meeting to order. Please stand as you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilman Lawson will lead the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Larkey,
Here.
Councilmember Savage,
Here.
Councilmember Powell,
Here.
Councilmember Trutzel,
Here.
Councilmember Kraft,
Here.
Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Councilmember Goff,
Here.
Councilmember Lawson,
Here.
Councilmember Peak.
We have no personal appearances tonight, so the consent agenda. One motion, non-debatable, to approve the recommendations noted. Any member of the council may ask for an item to be taken from the consent agenda for discussion and separate action.
Present.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
I just had a question. On the summary of the North Point performance agreement that was
He's got to
made-
take it off, Mayor.
What?
He's got
Oh,
to take it off if he has
Yeah,
questions.
If you got a question, you got to take it off the consent agenda, and we'll talk about it after the consent agenda is approved.
Oh,
So
okay.
you have to remove, if you got one line item that you want to talk about, we have to remove it.
Okay,
You got to make a motion to remove it.
remove it, and then once the question's answered, then I can take it off?
Well, we remove it, and then we'll vote on the consent agenda, and then we'll go to the item that you removed. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I move this first item.
Your microphone.
I move that this first item, starting with Andrea Cunningham, city clerk, and it had to do with the industrial development project performance agreement with North Point, be removed.
Councilmember Powell, are you asking for the minutes to be removed under separate action?
All I have is a question. I guess I have, to, according to what I just heard, I have to
I think he's talking about a resolution here.
Oh.
You're going back to the minutes.
Yeah,
you-
that's right. I just had a question. Is that okay to have a question or no?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, you had a question here? Or up here?
Well, this was the minutes, right?
No. Oh, that may be, yeah, that's the
That's the minutes. So, yeah, I had a question about the minutes.
So for discussion of consent agenda items as the kind of preamble that the mayor reads, to discuss those outside of just a simple vote does just require you to move it to the regular agenda, and then it'll just be discussed separately down there.
Oh, okay.
The consent agenda is typically set up that way because those are generally housekeeping items or budgeted items that don't typically require discussion. So when discussion's required, we simply just put, a council member can ask for them to be removed and then put onto the regular agenda.
Okay. Well, to simply ask a question, then I move that it be, that this consent, the minutes that are to be discussed in the consent agenda or to be approved in the consent agenda be moved to the regular agenda.
So you would just simply have to ask for item A to be moved to the regular agenda. And then I don't believe that we typically do motions or vote on those. That is a council prerogative to simply
Okay.
move it from the consent agenda.
Okay, all right.
All right, so with that, we have, all right, let me make sure I'm where I'm at. We have a consent agenda in front of us with item A removed. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda with item A removed?
You have a motion on the floor with a second, so all we need is a voice vote.
Okay, so, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? None seen. Passes. So, regular agenda.
So we'll need to go back and discuss letter A.
That'll be the first item on the
That
regular
would be
agenda.
the first item. Okay, that's all I was gonna answer. So, item A, so. Do I just call it item A then, since you said it moved to the regular meeting? Regular
Yeah, it's
agenda?
just, I would just read the title.
Okay. Item A, a motion approving the minutes of the April 13th, 2021 city council meeting. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
This is where you would ask your
This
question,
this is where your
Councilmember.
question gets asked.
Okay, okay. Again, just being a newbie, in response to the industrial development project performance agreement between Belton and North Point, there were certain things that Councilman Davidson asked. This is in the meeting that happened earlier that night. And the answer was that the staff would correct inconsistent berm height, that they would look after a email address for complaints in this area and things like that. So I'm just wondering how we as council, where are those things kept? How would we know? I guess if we got a notice about an email, we would then know about it. But how do we know that there's work being done on, or work on correcting the inconsistent berm height, for instance?
So those sorts of matters are sometimes reflected in the minutes. I do believe some of them are here, but typically that would be during council communications. You could ask city staff about the status of berm heights, of all of those sorts of things.
Okay.
And city council, or city staff would at that time either be able to answer the question or be able to reach back out to North Point to check on the status of that issue.
Okay. And I'm not suggesting that anybody's not doing their job. I just want to know if I want to follow up, if it's on me to follow up, or if these things are added to some major list and they come up every once in a while.
Well, so some of the things were amendments to the actual performance agreement. That's
Right.
why the title is as amended. So some of those are now just plain and simple contract requirements of North Point. And then some of those were more, like the paving of the roads and the subdivision were excluded from the performance agreement.
Right.
But that is still something that staff will continue to follow up with North
Right,
Point.
and then
regarding.
2 of them fell on staff itself, the email and the berm.
Yeah, so
Okay.
in the future, some questions like that could be best handled during council communications.
Okay. Okay.
So, may I speak to just?
Go ahead, sir.
Probably muddy it up worse, but.
No, that's all right.
But this is just to approve the minutes of what was spoken in the last meeting.
Right, if he saw something wrong with our minutes, then that's when you pull it out, but this isn't when you talk about the last meeting, it'd be council communications when you talk about it. This is if you found an error in the minutes that we need to have adjusted, that's when we talk about this.
So that, I mean,
I understand.
okay, all right.
Thank you.
But this is the minutes of 2 meetings ago.
Yes,
Yeah,
and then we're
okay.
just approving them, so, but
Right,
if you had a
right.
question about the content of what was there, that's when you would ask. But
Okay.
like Patrick told you, that any questions you have about that should be in council
Okay.
communications.
Okay.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion on item A from the consent agenda? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. All right, motion approving the first reading of bill number 2021-24.
An ordinance approving a final plat for Center 301, a tract of land in the southwest quarter of Section 12, Township 46, Range 33 in the city of Belton, Cass County, Missouri, and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to sign the plat for recording with the Cass County Recorder's Office.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, could you tell me who were first and second?
Motion, Councilman Clark, second, Councilman Trutzel.
Thank you.
I have a question. I was discussing this with our legal counsel. The plats well, I'll just talk about this plat. Even though it says in our Uniform Development Code that final plats coming here would be signed by the owners and notarized and everything, he says that's not necessarily the case, but they probably should be, at least for the final reading, so or the second reading. So this is the first reading, that's okay, but I would personally like to see the plat signed and the name of the owner of the property on it, which is not on the second one we're going to discuss, and then a notarized copy presented to us. So again, it has no bearing on tonight's because this is the first reading, but I would like maybe you could form a motion of that the second reading of a plat at least has what our Uniform Development Code calls for.
Yeah, so Section 3635A4 of the Uniform Development Code does require names and signatures of the owners or the properly duly acknowledged and notarized shall appear on the copies submitted. Obviously, this is a first reading, so those would just need to appear on the second reading when this is finally passed. Again, a first reading is essentially just saying it's good for now. We'll consider it again for the second reading. So I do believe that staff can take that direction and have something with those requirements in it for
Okay.
the second reading.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councilman
Mayor,
Ball.
I just would like to point out that I wasn't on the council at the time this all took place and got us here today and we're to take a vote on it. Having been on the Planning and Zoning Board for 5 years, 10 years ago, we did a lot of work to come up with the proper answers for the council and the mayor, and often it felt like it was not really heeded, to tell you the truth. And based upon our packet, it says that our Planning Commission Board says they recommend this, and so based on that, I trust that they did the due diligence and all of it, and I would vote yes for it. I just wanted to point out that their work doesn't go
Unnoticed.
unnoticed.
Appreciate
yes.
that. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. Motion approving first reading of bill number 2021-25.
An ordinance approving a final plat replat for Lot 8, Belton Gateway, a tract of land in the southwest quarter of Section 12, Township 46, Range 33, in the city of Belton, Cass County, Missouri, and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to sign the plat for recording with the Cass County Recorder's Office.
Present.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. City Council liaison reports. Do we have any liaison reports? None. Mayor's communications. I have motions. First, a motion appointing Councilman David Clark as Mayor Pro Tem.
Present.
We have a motion and a second. Is that voice or,
Yes, this would be voice because it is just a motion.
so, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. B, a motion appointing Councilman Rob Powell as the City Council liaison to the Planning Commission.
Present.
We have a motion.
One second.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Councilman Peak.
Before the vote on the appointment of Councilmember Powell to the Planning Commission, I wish to share some concerns about this appointment. I am concerned that Councilmember Powell is biased, unfamiliar with the duties of the Planning Commission, and may have a one-sided perspective of development that may not be in the best interest for the city of Belton as a whole. I do not make these statements without an example of his comments and actions. First, Councilmember Powell is unfamiliar with many of our codes, including the Uniform Development Code, nor is he familiar with what his actual responsibility is to the commission. This may make him a detriment to quality planning for the city of Belton, and frankly, would be going to the Planning Commission with pre-existing viewpoints and may therefore be prejudiced with his outlook of a project that will not reflect those of the mayor or city council as a whole. Councilmember Powell, while stating he supports development in the city of Belton, has also stated that he believes there has been adequate amount of commercial development and the city should focus on redevelopment of the city. Does this speak to someone who is open-minded and about any businesses, small or large, that wish to make Belton their home? Actions and comments reportedly made by him or a family member before and during the election season stating they do not shop in Belton and do not support local businesses. This sounds like he not only does not support new businesses into Belton, he also does not support existing businesses. For these reasons and more, I will be voting no on this item. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
I guess I'd like to respond as a business owner in Belton. And we do shop in Belton. I just went the other day to Price Chopper and spent $300 on groceries. Yes, I'll be honest. I do think, and you took that off of some of my campaign material, I think that I do think there's got to be a better balance between residential and commercial, but I have no issues with anything that's so far coming up. I don't think I have a track record of anything because I haven't even been here except for one and a half meetings. So I'm not sure where you got your information from, but if people think that I'm biased, I guess I need more examples than that, or at least hopefully the rest of the council needs more examples than that. So.
Any other discussion?
I'll make a comment. I'm gonna be the guy that sits there and says it's the mayor's duty to appoint people, and I will support the mayor, but I think what Mrs. Councilwoman Peak is saying is true. It might not have been Rob Powell stating some of this stuff, but sometimes words that you see on Facebook that you might not have put out there, but your family member's doing, and attaching your name to it, it makes what she's saying is absolutely correct. And I told Mayor that I didn't think that you'd be a good candidate for it, but since this is what the mayor wanted, I do support it. But comments previous to being on council make me question it.
Well, the other thing is, going back to Ms. Peak's comments, I have read the Uniform Development Code. I made some comments about it tonight, in fact, and all I can say is I promise to be fair. I'm not going into preconceived notions, but I am asking residents before I go, if there's something to be voted on that the residents are particularly upset about, I'll at least bring those concerns to the Planning Commission. I've never been to a well, I guess I was there once to talk about sidewalks, but that had to do as a citizen, not as a board member. So again, I'm hopeful that I would be fair, and but I am going to bring residents' concerns when something that affects Ward 4 residents in particular. I'm going to be talking to the Planning Commission and to Dave Clements about those issues. That doesn't mean I'm going to be biased in my vote. I'm sure in the planning boards, you hear from the developer, you hear from people who are petitioning against that, whatever it is, if it's controversial. And yeah, I guess you'll have to vote your consciences, I guess.
Councilmember Kraft.
I was hoping we could get kind of a description of what exactly a liaison is. Are they a voting member, or are they more of just a go-between the committee and council?
So in this case, the city council liaison is a voting member of the planning commission. I think most here know pretty much about the planning commission, especially since Councilmember Goff was on it for such a long time. But the planning commission is a recommending body outside of a very limited number of items. So anything that it does occur at the planning commission will typically find its way back to the city council for a full vote and approval by the city council. So the planning commission member that is a member of the council does vote. They are one of the 9 members, but then outside of the comp plan and a few other miscellaneous things, everything that the planning commission does ends up back at the city council for final approval.
Any other discussion? Councilman Savage.
Yeah, it is also a very important position for guiding the city and guiding the way the development is done, plumb down to facades, streets, how they work, and it does mean a lot when it comes to here. So it's very strong position. So a good planner and a group of good planners is absolutely necessary. I too feel the same way. I feel that Councilman was very much already had his mind made up, did not have near enough information just from the comments that I heard said out here in the public, which you have every right, sir, to say, but it was preconceived in every way, thereby being, I cannot support this either. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Councilman Trutzel.
I will be abstaining from the vote.
Any other discussion?
Am I supposed to leave the room or supposed to abstain, or?
No, you still can vote on this. Being a member of the planning commission does not grant you really any extra privileges or authorities. It's just a role, like Councilmember Savage more in depth explained, and like I explained, where you are the first set of eyes on new developments in the city of Belton prior to them getting to the city council for their final approval in most cases.
Okay.
Councilman Lawson. Councilwoman, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's fine. I'll just state that I think Councilmember Powell was elected in a tough election with a lot of candidates. I think he put in the legwork to talk to constituents and get their perspective, and I think he is thorough and humble when he asks questions. So, I mean, just for what it's worth, I support this, and I wish him well all the time. There we go. Thanks.
All right, any other discussion?
Mayor,
Yes.
it was pointed out that it does end up at the council for the final vote, and regardless of whatever his thoughts are or reasons, it will end up the council again. So if there's bias thought to be in there, it comes up here.
Yes, duly noted. So, any other discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
That motion carries. City Manager's report. No, you're fine.
I'm sorry. At this time, the city council got our update.
Sorry.
That's okay. Received a note from me last week that we wanted to try to plan tours of the city. I've heard from 3 of you, so if you'll take a look at those dates, they're May 26th, 27th, and 28th with different time slots. So I still have open time slots if you want to get signed up. So don't mean to sound like a infomercial, but just let me know when you're available and we'll get you in there. For those 3 that have responded to me with a date and time, you did receive that time slot. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Did you send that to new council or to all council?
All council.
Okay.
It was in my weekly Friday update.
Do we have any communications from city council members?
I do.
Councilman Gall.
I don't know if this is the proper place to bring this up or not, and it may have been discussed before, but I have had several people come to me here in the last month, wanting to have brought to the council the situation they have with a subdivision over behind the hospital, trapped in there by Bell Ray and the cottages. It's called Meadow Creek. It's Meadow Creek Parkway, one road going in there. That's the only road going in and coming out, and they're about to build another 70 more houses in there. And they're upset that there's only one road coming in and out of there, and I can't disagree with that. In fact, I thought legally they had that B2, and I was on the Planning Commission when that subdivision was done. There was a back way out of there that either went into Bell Ray or the hospital or somewhere over in there. And how come it didn't get done, I don't know. But I was told in the morning, coming out onto Mullen Road there by the cottages, they get backed up because the traffic is so heavy on Mullen. I think we need to, and I don't know who to approach on this, but I think we need to look at this and see what we can do to help them, or figure out why even the second one didn't get put in there, because I know that there was a way out of there when this was approved. So this is something I wanted to bring up, and I don't know for sure who's the one I need to talk with.
Right.
Can you look into that?
Yes, we're happy to look into that. We have had conversations with that neighborhood. That issue, I know specifically, was discussed at Planning Commission as a concern at the time. And but we can pull more information together and let you know what the issues are in that area. There is an emergency route on the back with a Knox box for fire to be able to come and go from the area. And then the other alternatives to possibly look at as a second route through there at initial glance is anywhere from a $2 to $3 million venture to add a road through there. But I'm happy to sit down and show you what those areas are and what the Planning Commission.
I didn't know this had been covered before, but
Yeah.
having said that, there was a route that was supposed to be there when that subdivision was approved, and what I'm kind of wanting to know is why it wasn't put in, who skirted that, and
Yeah, we'll have to look back. That was BMT before my time, so.
I will interject here a little bit from my past hat. I think when that subdivision was after the 08, 09 crash, and then the person that developed it lost it, and then somebody bought it in like 14, 15, and they wanted to add, at that time there was like 28, 29 houses built, and they wanted to add more. At that time, there was supposed to be an entrance to the west side of the hospital. I think it's still platted that way, but nobody ever came up with the money because the original developer went bankrupt, and then whoever bought it from the bank, I believe that's what happened. I'm not 100% sure if I'm recalling that right.
Did you say west of the hospital?
Yes, west of the hospital. It should have went south off of Meadow Creek down to the outer road.
Okay.
I believe it was platted that way, if I remember right.
It's probably only about a quarter of a mile difference from that.
It is, but it's not that far difference, but I think that was the original plat, and I think the expense was they had to put a bridge across that creek, and that's why it probably never got done after the original developer went bankrupt.
Okay.
So I think I remember talking about that when that new development behind it was formed, and then we put that entrance into Springdale, so.
well, the problem's gonna come when you put another 70 more houses back there, and it's gonna go.
No,
really
I'm with
bad.
you, yeah, I'm with you. I think we need to look at it, so.
Okay, would appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other communications? Councilmember Crown?
Yes, I had a question about something we didn't pull from the consent agenda, because I knew I was still wanting to consent because I did get the answers earlier, but something that a lot of citizens were coming to me about, asking about the 6 replacement ruggedized laptops and the amount purchased. They were very curious about the bidding process, and then also as to why the laptops were costing about $3,000 each. So I was hoping that we could maybe discuss that so that our citizens can understand that as I do now.
Thank you, Councilmember Kraft. That item, and thank you for letting me know your question earlier today so we could address it this evening. Chief Lyons would like to speak to that item.
Go ahead, Chief.
My first time with the mic, so I hope I got it right. Yeah, red's on. It's just not loud. These laptops are ruggedized, like it said in there, but I would consider them more militarized. And we actually brought one of the devices with us tonight. If Lieutenant Shriver would show the device. These devices are a lot bigger and more ruggedized than what you'd find on the shelves of Best Buy or any kind of store. They are about 3 times in cost, but they meet all the type of requirements that we need, from having enough RAM to run all the programs that are inside the car. And those devices count on a back-end solution, a lot of times that has enough memory to run all those different things. And those solutions can go all the way from Aegis requirements to run people's criminal histories, run DOR, all those types of things. It could incorporate DOJ standards or CJIS standards in regards to dual authentication to make sure if once the police officer leaves that car that it cannot be accessed by anybody that breaks into the car. And then there's so many different applications that they use on those devices that require those extra requirements as far as memory, RAM, etc. The other thing that is unique about these devices is that they are commercialized. And when I say that, these are beefier and last longer. They have a 2-year warranty, but they also have extended warranty that takes them out to 5 years. And believe me, we get every bit of the work out of them, and when we're done with them, they're usually to the point to where they're not useful for even accomplishing much. And then these are always purchased through a national cooperative purchasing alliance that we actually use for these devices, and these devices have been used for us for a long period of time. And the reason that we stick with this and go through this cooperative bid is because they are so durable.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
I just have 2 quick comments. First of all, as you can tell, I asked some dumb questions, but the staff has really been supportive of answering them in a timely manner, from Alexa on down through everybody else. And second, I know the Parks Department has taken on some big responsibilities, the cruise nights and the farmers market. And I just wanted to compliment them on their first cruise of the year last Saturday. I'm usually not a fan of cruises, but they handled it, I think, successfully. I was in the area for a lot of the afternoon, and I think it went really well, so thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned.